Hi everyone, it's Nicole. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be sharing a little tutorial with you featuring some felt ornaments, or what I turned into a garland. I felt this fell more into the purview of floss tube or stitching, so I am going to include this in my stitching series. Here are some rainbow die cut trees. Now, if you are here because you follow FlossTube and you are not a paper crafter, this is a die cutting machine and some dies that were created for paper crafting. And I'm using the stitched Christmas tree frames, or the star from there, and the outside in stitched Christmas tree for the Christmas tree shape. These are Lawn Fawn dies, and I am die cutting them from 100% wool felt. I really prefer the 100% wool felt. The quality is much better. In my opinion. You can definitely use whatever you want, but I find that when I'm stitching my felt into shapes and pulling tight with my floss, or in this case, I'm using crochet thread today, I don't have where it pulls and tears. And so I really love it. I keep all of my little bits and pieces and scraps as I was showing there, but I am using a die cutting machine to die cut these into shapes. These dies are made for paper crafting. As I was saying, for anyone who doesn't do paper crafting, you could also cut some trees into shape with some felt if you don't have a die cutting machine, and you could very easily just cut a simple shape, like a triangle kind of shape, and stitch up some fun little trees to do something similar. Now, I am using felt mostly from Tailored Expressions. I will list a couple of other sources down in the description below of places I like to get 100% wool felt. I did do a rainbow of trees. To do this, you will need 2 of each tree shape, and then I did 1 of each star. I actually die cut 2 stars, but I ended up only needing 1, so I saved all those extra little parts and pieces for later. My goal with this tree garland is I really like, or have decided that I want to decorate my craft studio. And because I do pretty traditional Christmas colors in the rest of my house, I am doing full out color in my studio. So here you can see a bunch of the ornaments. I'm going to do a blanket stitch to stitch them together, and I'm also going to be stitching on some buttons from my stash and a die cut felt letter. These letters are also dies from Lawn Fawn. I absolutely love them. To spell out the word Christmas, you could do these individually and make them more into ornaments or gift tags, like monogrammed tags that the recipient can then keep and hang on the tree later on. To start, I am taking some white crochet thread. That's those big spools of thread I was showing there just a minute ago. And I am going to backstitch my letter in place on one side of the tree. So before I ever start putting the whole tree together, I am going to just stitch one side. And we're going to decorate it with a monogram or a letter. And I'm going to be spelling out Christmas. And then I will be sewing on some buttons. As I mentioned, most of the buttons are from my stash, with the exception of a few which are I picked up within the last few months. They're from Buttons Galore. If I have links for anything, I will provide it below. Some of these products I've literally had in my stash, like the solid buttons, I think I've had in my stash for years and years. I think they're from Studio Calico, but I can't really tell you. I store my buttons by color, and I'm glad I held on to my buttons. Buttons are one of my favorite things. I used to use them in scrapbooking quite often, and I held on to them, and I'm just now kind of getting back into doing some other crafts and things, and felt is a great one where you can kind of incorporate some of those. And I thought, instead of die cutting felt round circles, which you definitely could if you don't have the buttons, I opted to use the buttons instead. I like the texture and the colors, and you can see I'm going for very, very colorful. Now with back stitching the letters onto the tree, it doesn't have to be perfect. You are going to notice that my stitching is not perfect. I did my best, and I decided it was good enough. I ripped out a couple of them because I was just unhappy with my stitching, but ultimately I decided that these are handmade and I kind of like a little wonky. You'll see that in the blanket stitch that we're going to do here in a little bit as well. There are lots of different ways you can stitch things on. You could do more of a running stitch instead of the back stitch that I'm doing here, which would give you, you would have do a few less stitches. That would be, I've done that before. That works well. I am going to stitch my buttons on. That is something that I personally have always loved. You could hot glue them on if you don't want to do the additional stitching. You could hot glue your monogram on. So there are other ways to eliminate a little bit of the hand stitching if you don't want to do that. I know one of the questions that I have been asked, I did give my Patreon members a little sneak peek of this, and one of the questions I was asked the most probably was how long this took me. And it did not go fast. It probably took somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. I did not do it all at once. I did all of my die cutting one day, and then I picked out like all of my buttons and all of my crochet thread and laid everything out. And then I sewed the trees over the next couple days when I had some time. I did watch TV while I did most of my stitching, with the exception of this one right here, which I tried to do on camera. I will apologize. I know I will be out of frame here and there throughout. It is really hard to stitch on camera, and I got to stitching and didn't notice that I wasn't always in frame. So I apologize right now. If there's something that you definitely can't see or you need me to explain better, please let me know. I can always try to maybe film like a little short or include it into the next floss tube episode. Now, this is not what I would normally do with cross stitch, but we're going to travel, and we're going to travel a lot. I don't really care because this is going to be sandwiched and it's going to be the inside of a little stuffed shape. So I am not going to like run my stitches underneath or knot it or anything. I'm just going to travel right on over and start stitching on buttons. And I do that all over my tree. This is really not the quote unquote correct way of stitching probably, but you know, I don't really care. And I just wanted to get it done. This is how I did all of them. In fact, if you see anything from me felt ornament stitched wise, you can pretty much rest assured that inside it is a hot mess. My regular like cross stitch projects, I really do try to make those look kind of nice on the back and do a nicer job, but you are not going to be able to see through it. The felt is nice and thick, so it's not like you're going to be able to see the thread. And once they're all stitched and stuffed up, they look great. So I am simply stitching on about 5 buttons. I like the odd number of buttons. And I didn't, as I mentioned a little bit ago, an assortment. Now you could use embroidery floss if you want to. I actually started with embroidery floss and I ripped it out because I happened to turn around in my craft room with the first one I started to stitch, which was not this one. It was a different one. And I was like, oh yeah, I have all this crochet thread. So the crochet thread is a single strand. It is thick. I am not exactly sure. I am not a knitter, crocheter or anything like that. tatting maybe. I don't know how to do any of those kinds of hobbies. So you guys will have to tell me in the comments if you know exactly what this crochet thread is for. I picked it up several years ago in a whole rainbow assortment of colors to do another craft project with. And then I also use it a lot like on tags or anytime I have to sew a button onto some sort of a project. I really love this crochet thread. Well, I'd kind of forgotten about it. And so I ended up using it. So I do want to talk, we're going to start the blanket stitch. I'm going to go in between the two layers to come up from the inside. I've knotted the end. I am using a contrasting color of crochet thread and I am going to go in real time. I will speed it up a bit here in a minute. So I'm going to come up in between the two layers. Now the key to this is you want to start with a really long piece of crochet thread, embroidery floss, whatever you're using, so that you don't have to stop and start again. It is hard, it does get tangled, so that is the only downside, but I promise you'll be glad. After you come up from the center, you go through both layers and come right back up where you came out before, and then you take the tip of your needle and go through the loop. So let me come right next to it, and this is where I really wanted to apologize. I didn't realize that it was blurry and not focusing on what I was doing. So I'm coming up from the back. I've left a little loop. I'm going to go through it. And this is a blanket stitch. As I get a little further, you're going to see a little bit more. It creates this beautiful decorative edge that really dresses up the tree. And in my opinion, probably is the thing that makes this tree the cutest. The buttons are darling, the letters, the monograms are super cute, but that contrasting color of blanket stitching around the edge, worth it. And just an FYI, you guys, I am completely self-taught with this blanket stitch, so if I'm doing it wrong, that's fine. I watched some YouTube videos a while back. I've done the blanket stitch a few times. Like a year or two now, but I will say that I was completely self-taught. I did not know how to do this before. It's easy. It's really easy, and once you get going, it is very relaxing. It does take a little bit of time. You could whip stitch to sew up your tree. You could do a back stitch like I did with the letter to sew up your tree if you don't like doing a blanket stitch. Honestly, there is no right or wrong way, but I would highly, highly recommend a contrasting color of floss or crochet thread because it adds a really, really cute look. Now there is some quality control issues here. Not all of my stitches are exactly even. I did try my very best, but you can even see in some of those ornaments sitting in the basket in the background that not every single stitch is completely uniform. But that's okay. Again, they're handmade and I promise it is worth it. It's a really fun project. Really, really fun. I give away like 99% of the felt projects I make as gifts. And it was really kind of fun that this is going to be something for me in my craft room. And it makes me really, really happy. So really, really fun. I could see this in a little girl's room as well. Keep in mind, you could do something so similar and not do maybe trees. You could do other shapes. If you don't have trees and you want to do something right now and you don't want to get trees, you could always take circles and kind of make them into ornaments. That would be really cute. There are a lot of ways to create something similar and a lot of different shape dies out there. I've done the mitten tutorial. I have another mitten ornament tutorial coming soon. You could take that exact idea and you could replicate that here. Pashta Design, which I've mentioned many times, has fantastic stitching dies. The difference with those is they are going to come when you die cut them, they are going to come with the holes to follow and stitch, which is a little bit easier. This is probably a little bit more of a quote unquote advanced. It's not really, but there's not the stitching holes or guides to follow. So I'm going to continue blanket stitching all the way around. Again, I just want to reiterate, start with a really long piece of crochet thread or floss so that you don't have to start and stop. The crochet thread I got is from Hobby Lobby. I believe Michael's has it. I don't know if they have all these colors, and I find it on an end cap in Hobby Lobby if you are looking for it and wondering exactly where to get it. None of the colors I'm using here are new. I've had all of them for years and years. So I am going to speed up the video a little bit now, but I will keep it in so you can just kind of see me working my way around. I will get to about, I would say, 1.5 inches to 2 inches from where I started, and then I'm going to stop. I'm not going to tie it off. I'm just going to leave my needle, leave my thread, and we're going to stuff it. And the other big thing is I did start at the top of the tree because I knew I was going to add a star to the top, which is going to allow me to hide the fact that I am knotting off the crochet thread. I did try to finish it nicely, but just in case it looks a little, you know, ugly, I wanted it to be somewhere where I could hide it, and the top of the tree was the perfect spot for that. So I'm simply going to work my way around. I even love how these look in a basket. If they didn't have like the monograms on them, I think they'd be really cute, just, you know, in a basket like this. Ornaments, felt ornaments, shapes, circle shapes would be cute in a basket or a bowl, I guess. As your thread gets shorter, I did find it was a little more manageable. It's always just a little harder at the first, but it's worth it. It's totally worth it. And the crochet thread being a little thicker does give you that nice little decorative edge. I would highly recommend trying it. It's cheap. So it was a really fun way to do all kinds of projects with it. Going around the bottom. The bottom of the tree was kind of my favorite because there was nothing sharp. One of the great things about this particular shape is it is very easy to blanket stitch. There's no like sharp corners, no 90-degree corners or anything like that you need to be, you know, a little bit trickier with your blanket stitch. It was very easy to blanket stitch. It's all nice little curved edges, so it really, really stitched up lovely. And we're just gonna keep going around. Now, for stuffing, if you saw my pillow tutorial where I showed how to stuff like a little cross stitch pillow, it is going to be very much the same. I'm going to use polyester fiber fill, and I am going to loft the stuffing before I put it into my felt shape. This is so that you don't get any of those lumpy, bumpy, weird kind of, you know, lumps in your felt ornament. I do like mine stuffed. You could leave it flat if you want to. I'm not going to overstuff it. Anytime I'm working with felt, I tend to err on the side of going like a little less. Less is more, I guess, in this case, which is completely contrary to my philosophy in most things, which is more is more. I always joke on my card making channel that I'm a little extra and I like all the extra little things. But in this case, I would definitely go with less is more. And there I've left about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and I'm just gonna loft. I'm gonna take that polyester fiber fill in between my two hands and pull it apart. It's called lofting. I'm gonna open up my tree and I'm just going to stuff that down, filling those bottom corners first. So I just wanna put a little bit in both those corners. Let's loft a little more. And we're going to fill it. You can see I've just left my crochet thread and my needle because I'm going to continue stitching it shut. And you just want it to have a nice little tree shape. If you wanted these to be a little more weighted, let's say you are going to create them and you want them to like maybe set up a little bit more, I would say some walnut shells, or I think it's called lizard litter. Am I right about that, everyone? You can grab those things and you can kind of put some of that down in the bottom, put in a little polyester fiber fill and fill the rest with that. And it will give it a little bit more of a weighted look. I'm hanging this on the wall with command hooks, and so I definitely just went with polyester fiber fill, which is nice and light. And then I'm going to continue stitching. And I am going to come and just kind of pinch it shut. And I know, again, I'm way too close to myself and out of range of my camera. I'm so mad. But I'm holding my finger there, which is grabbing the loop that I need to go back through. Always just remember to take your needle back through the same direction each time. As I come to the top, I will show you how I finish that off. Super, super pretty. I'm just kind of using my finger as a loop holder, I kind of call it. I missed that time. Usually I try to use it. It helps keep the thread from knotting too bad. So as I'm coming up to the top, I am just trying to keep that same consistency, but I want that outer blanket edge to make sure it goes all the way around. And because of that, when I get to the top, I will I will come back through one of the same holes I've stitched before so that it has the continuous edge all the way around. There we go. And just like that, we finished it. Now you can kind of run it through and make a little loop and knot it, which is what I did. And then I usually take the end and I just slide it back and forth through the top of my tree, kind of through the seam one way and then the other. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to snip that, and it will hide the thread down inside of my ornament. And then you can kind of smush it around however you want. Now, taking whatever thread is left on my needle and the felt star and a button, I'm going to come in from the back of the top of my tree. I've doubled over my thread this time. And I'm going to go through my button, and on the back, I'm actually just going to knot this and then trim it off. That's how I'm securing the star and that button to the top of my tree. Super easy. I don't mind that on the back. Again, no one's really going to see it. It looks fine. Now to make this a garland, I'm just going to go in with my white crochet thread. I've got my needle on. And starting with the end of the word, so the S in Christmas, I am actually going to thread that on first. And I am going to simply run my needle through the top of each of the trees, almost kind of back behind the star, but kind of in between the two layers of the tree is all I'm doing. That is how I'm making it into a little garland. It's super, super easy. You could use something thicker. I had originally thought to use a thicker twine, but it would have been really hard. You wouldn't have been able to do this. And so I did end up using the crochet thread, and then I will show you how I knot the ends to make little hanging loops. And what's great is if you ever want to change this, you could always just snip the knots out and unthread it, and your ornaments are going to be fine. You could just hang them on a tree or something if you wanted to. So it's kind of very easy this way. So when I get to the end, and I accidentally dipped the end in my coffee, so let me clean that up. I am going to, let's go ahead and do the other end real quick. I'm going to loop it over, and I'm simply going to knot it just like that. And it creates a loop, and I'm going to snip that off. And then I'm going to make sure that they're pretty evenly spaced, and I've left myself enough room. I'm going to snip off the end of that, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other end, creating a little loop. And those are going to be the hanging loops for the command hooks on my wall, or nails, or whatever the case may be. If you're going to hang it from a mantle or something, or maybe you have the little screw-in hooks, it'll work with any of those things. You can always dress up the ends with like some ribbons if you want to, but that is it. So easy, really, really cute, bright, happy, and fun. Thank you so much for joining me today for this rainbow felt garland tutorial. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, click that like button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to always be notified when I have a new floss tube, stitching, or quilting video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.